I have been married to Alan for years, and we have always led separate lives. He has been deeply in love with his secretary, while I've had a series of flings. I thought this is how our days would continue, until I met a genuine and sincere person who didn't care about my wealth, but only wanted to marry me. I was moved, so I went back to Alan and asked for a divorce. That night, Alan destroyed everything in our home and grabbed me by the neck, angrily saying, "Who allowed you to take things seriously?" I was dozing off on the couch in the evening when the doorbell rang. I shuffled over in my slippers to open the door, and a heavily intoxicated Alan stumbled in. His secretary, who was supporting him, seemed to be struggling. When she looked up at me, her eyes widened with surprise, and she flirtatiously brushed her bangs aside. "Judy, President Allen drank too much today, so I'm here to bring him back," she said, emphasizing the words "let me," as if she were a natural hostess. "Judy, could you make a pot of sobering soup for President Allen, but without adding longan, as he doesn't like it," she added, blushing slightly. "He always wants to have it when he's hungover in the morning." I found it somewhat amusing. The tactics of this newly graduated girl asserting her dominance were rather clumsy, and I couldn't summon the energy to compete with her. I took Alan from her and said calmly, "All right, thank you. Do you need me to call a taxi for you to go back?" "Alan, really, such a beautiful young girl. He doesn't even worry about you going back alone and still wants you to send him off," she said, her expression changing. Jill fell silent. I couldn't be bothered to say much more. I closed the door and kicked Alan, who was slumped on the couch. "Enough with the act," I said. "Thanks," Alan replied, his eyes still closed, his tone devoid of any trace of drunkenness. "She's been getting clingy lately, always wanting to marry me." "I thought I'd give her some space," he continued. I didn't say a word. Jill was different, though. Over the years, Alan and I had been living our separate lives, with women coming and going by his side. The longest-lasting relationship lasted only 3 months. He was naturally fickle, never willing to stay too long with one person. At the time, I thought I would be the exception, but after just 3 years of marriage, he couldn't resist wandering outside again. This Jill, however, was different. She had been with him for 2 years. It was clear that Alan genuinely liked her. If it were someone else, he probably would have already replaced her. This time, he just wants to give her some space, but deep down, he can't let go. In the past, I would have cried and made a scene, heartbroken. But now, I remained expressionless and said, "Alan, let's get a divorce." Alan lifted his eyelids and glanced at me, scoffing. "Judy, are you having another episode? We agreed to live our own lives, so why are you acting like this again?" He rolled over, his long legs bending at the knees and resting on the carpet. He reached out his hand, trying to hold mine dismissively. "Let's just say I was wrong today. I shouldn't have let her send me back. She's just a young girl who doesn't understand things. Don't bother with her." I pulled my hand away and took out a divorce agreement from the drawer of the coffee table, placing it in front of him. "I'm serious. I have someone else." Alan finally bothered to open his eyes. But he still had that lazy, disdainful look, as if he was convinced that I was just causing trouble again. He casually flipped through the divorce agreement a couple of times, but his expression gradually froze. I leaned in to take a peek, afraid that he wouldn't understand. There are a total of properties in the family, including the one in Australia and the one in the United States. I had them appraised, and I have 8 properties, while you have 9. There's also the company, where I own % of the shares. You have the first right to purchase at market price. The rest isn't worth much. We can each take our own. What do you think? If you don't agree, I'll get a lawyer to add more details." Alan slowly straightened his body. That laziness that was characteristic of him disappeared in an instant, and he regained his imposing presence. "Judy." He lifted his head and looked at me, a cold glint passing through his narrow eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses. Alan's eye color was pale, especially under the light. When he stared at someone, there was a kind of inorganic indifference. "Are you serious?" Of course, I was serious. I had mentioned divorce before, but that was years ago. Back then, in order to make Alan change his mind, I tried everything, crying, causing a scene, even threatening to hang myself. I used every method I could think of. But this time, I genuinely wanted a divorce. Judy, what do you want this time? Alan threw the agreement on the coffee table with some annoyance. Jill won't affect your position. Why can't you tolerate her? He thought I was causing a fuss because of Jill. And indeed, when I first found out about Jill, I did have several intense arguments with him. At the worst point, I smashed everything in the house, sat in the midst of the wreckage with disheveled hair like a madwoman, and used broken pieces of porcelain to cut my wrists, threatening him and Jill to end their relationship. It was useless. He still stayed with her. I shook my head. I used to have such a love-struck mind, so submissive. I could barely stand to think about it now. I almost wanted to go back and strangle that pathetic version of myself. It's not about that this time. I lifted my head and met Alan's gaze, smiling somewhat sheepishly. It's the young kid I have outside. He insists on marrying me, and he won't give up. I can't do anything about him. It was difficult to see that almost blank expression on Alan's face. After a moment, his complexion finally turned unpleasant. Judy, I've already said it. Jill won't affect you. You don't need to make such a big deal out of it.
He still didn't believe me.
I couldn't help but smile wryly. Well, how about you get a larger share of the properties? The villa in Australia can be yours too. I'm in a hurry, so consider it a spiritual compensation for you. Alan looked at me for a while, as if confirming that I was truly serious this time. He squinted his eyes, his expression suddenly profound and unfathomable. Is it that young boy who escorted you home last time? I nodded. Edward had escorted me to the doorstep last time, and Alan had seen him once. Edward even greeted him with a smile, calling him brother. At that time, Alan's expression was a bit uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. After all, it was his idea to have separate relationships, and he had been practicing it all these years, so he didn't really have the right to be hypocritical. Thinking of Edward, a smile involuntarily appeared on my face. Today, at the beach, he took out a ring. There was even a 1-carat diamond on the ring. But compared to my other jewelry, it was just the most inconspicuous size. I thought it was fake and didn't pay much attention to it. But he knelt down in front of me with utmost sincerity. The ring might be a bit small. Please don't mind.
I earned this money for my job.
I originally wanted to save more, but I couldn't wait any longer. Judy, divorce him. Usually when someone proposes, they say, marry me. But he, on the other hand, directly said, divorce your husband. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and was about to brush it off casually, but Edward held on to me and didn't let go. The sea breeze carried a damp and refreshing feeling, his black hair brushing against his fair forehead, and his eyes were pure and bright, reflecting a whole me. The love of a young person burned like a fire, regardless of time and place, with the courage to consume everything. In that moment, I was suddenly infected by his courage. A voice appeared in my heart. It was my own voice. I'm all ready, and I've been entangled with him for 9 years. How many more sets of 9 years do I have left in my life? Do I have to continue living like this for the next several decades? The wind held by, the waves crashed against the rocks on the shore, splashing snow like foam. After a long while, I heard my own voice. Okay. Actually, I started to feel regretful after coming back. Being with Alan for so many years, even the division of property would be a complicated matter. For both of us, it was a painful process. So, all these years, we silently pursued our own interests without ever mentioning divorce. But thinking about Edward's gaze, I felt a hidden excitement and a sense of liberation. Perhaps it's time to start a new life. Well, kids, I smirked, they act on their impulses. If I don't agree, he'll get mad again.
You should understand, right?
I looked at Alan. Isn't it the same with Jill? Alan's eyebrows furrowed, revealing a trace of undisguised gloom. Judy, are you really serious? Admitting to taking an 8-year-old boy seriously wasn't an easy thing to say. But I still nodded. Edward is different from others. That was what Alan had said to me when I pressed him about why he insisted on being with Jill. He had a helpless smile in his eyes. Jill is different from others. And, of course, that included me. I never expected that now I would have to say those words to him. Alan paused, stormy emotions gathering in his eyes, his fingers slowly tightening, the knuckles turning pale. He sneered. "Judy, you're regressing more and more. What can this immature little brat give you?" He pointed at the coat casually placed on the sofa behind me with his chin. "He works for a year. Can he afford to buy you this coat?" That was not a lie. Over the years, although Alan's heart wasn't with me, he was still generous when it came to material things. I could swipe his card without any hesitation, and when the latest luxury items arrived, I didn't even need to go see them myself. The manager would bring the models to try them on for me. No wonder Jill was so eager to take my place. The life of a wealthy wife is truly extravagant and mesmerizing. I touched the inconspicuous diamond ring on my hand. It was a generic brand, with average clarity and setting. It was the kind of thing that would never appear in my jewelry box. But I liked it more than all the others. "It doesn't matter, I don't care about these things." Alan clearly noticed the diamond ring on my hand as well. The ring he had bought for me initially was a $1 pigeon egg, dazzling and specially brought back from Hong Kong. I had never wanted to wear it, and instead bought a pair of cheaper matching rings for us to wear. But after the initial few good years, we started having different dreams under the same roof. Or rather, he unilaterally grew tired of it. He stopped wearing his ring because the young girls outside didn't like it. During one of our arguments, I angrily took off the ring and threw it away. Since then, that ring was never found again, and my hand has been bare all this time. I repeated myself, "Alan, let's get a divorce." He paused for a moment and suddenly rushed towards me. He bumped into the coffee table, causing the vase to fall and shatter with a crisp sound. I was startled, but he grabbed my neck tightly. Alan leaned down, his eyes filled with cruelty. "Judy, who gave you permission to take things seriously?" I was startled and immediately pushed him away with force. "What's wrong with you?" I rubbed my neck and complained, "Why are you suddenly going crazy?" Alan stumbled a step and steadied himself, picking up the agreement document. "I'm crazy. Do you know how much property we have to divide for our divorce? Just the villa you mentioned alone is worth $1 million. For the sake of divorce, you don't even want the money. Is that kid so important to you?" I pondered for a moment and nodded.
Yes.
"It's not that I'm in love, but mainly because the half I'm getting is enough to secure my livelihood for several lifetimes. Even if I have all the money in the world, it's just sleeping on one bed. Why should I be bound in this relationship for money I can't spend? I've made up my mind. Even if it's not for Edward, I don't want to torture each other with Alan anymore." Alan tightly grasped the divorce agreement, crumpling the thick paper in his grip. He was always a person who kept his emotions in check, never showing any sign of anger no matter how crazy I got in the past. But now, he seemed furious, his face clouded with darkness, and I could even see the bloodshot veins in his eyes. Just when I thought he might lay hands on me, Alan suddenly took a deep breath. He pushed his glasses, clenched his jaw, and returned to his usual composed self. Only his eyes were heavy, showing no emotions. "Judy," he tore the agreement into pieces in a few swift motions and threw it away. "If you want a divorce, dream on." Alan stormed out, probably going to find Jill. I lay half reclined on the couch, covering my eyes with my arm. A message came from Edward on WeChat. "Did you ask him for a divorce? Is he giving you a hard time?" I didn't reply. I didn't know how to respond. I suddenly felt a bit exhausted. How did we end up like this? We were deeply in love when we first started. Back then, he had no money, and after work, we were starving. In the end, we gritted our teeth and bought a serving of cold noodles. He held back his saliva and handed it to me. "You eat." I refused, and we pushed it back and forth until we ended up each taking a bite from our respective ends, slowly eating towards the middle. He stuffed the remaining filling into my mouth. Marriage at that time, he was also as excited as Edward. Back then, he didn't have money like Edward. The engagement ring was so small that it looked like the ring Tom gave to the goddess, and the stone was so tiny that you needed a magnifying glass to see it. He hugged me, his young body temperature was high, making me sweat. He said, "Judy, I will treat you well for the rest of my life." Of course, I believed him. We were so in love at that time, Love to the point where growing old together seemed natural. But later, I learned that the human heart is the most fickle thing. At that moment, Alan probably really wanted to treat me well for a lifetime. Later on, he really wanted to treat someone else well. In the 3rd year of our marriage, when he came back, he still had the lingering scent of Chanel on him. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I questioned him about what was going on. He held me and swore, saying that he was just entertaining clients at KTV, that he never betrayed me. I believed him. And then it happened again. And again for the 3rd time. He slowly lost patience and no longer comforted me. He pushed me away in annoyance, saying, "What can a man do when he has to entertain clients? Can't you stop being so unreasonable?" And then he met Jill. She was a girl who bore a slight resemblance to me, but much younger. Fresh out of college, full of youthful energy, he brought her in against the rules. Alan started staying out all night, not coming back anymore. I knew he was disgusted with me. With such a young and vibrant body around, why would he come back to sleep by my side? My heart slowly turned to ashes in the burning of those nights. So when he said to me, "Judy, I think we should try an open relationship. You can go out and find whoever you want, I won't interfere with you. And you shouldn't interfere with me either. Of course, I won't let anyone outside shake your position. How about it?" I looked at Alan. The man in front of me had lost any trace of the past in his expression. The boy who used to squat with me at the subway station to share a cold noodle roll, perhaps he was just a figment of my imagination from the beginning. Time didn't kill him. Time just revealed his true appearance. An appearance I never truly saw. After a long time, I closed my eyes. All right. Meeting Edward was an unexpected event. At that time, I was spending Alan's money every day to hire male models as a form of revenge. I was drunk that day, and the manager had changed 5 batches of male models, but none of them caught my attention. Annoyed, I pushed open the door to go to the restroom. And there I bumped into Edward. He had just finished playing basketball and came to sing. He was still wearing his basketball jersey, with his sweaty bangs pushed back, revealing his youthful and well-defined eyebrows. In that instant, I was completely captivated. I grabbed him without hesitation and said to the manager and dissatisfaction, "Why are you hiding such a good-looking guy? I want him." I was truly intoxicated that day, and the rest of the events are mostly a blur. I only remember that I was clinging to Edward, asking him how much money it would take for him to go out with me. I woke up the next afternoon and found a new contact in my phone with an unfamiliar profile picture. There was a red dot on the profile picture. I clicked on it and saw the message. "Are you awake?" Later, I found out that on that day, while I was heavily intoxicated, I insisted on giving Edward money to go with me. I took out cash directly from my bag and said, "Is this enough?" He insisted on returning the money to me. I couldn't come out to meet him face to face, so I apologized profusely. "I'm sorry, I drank too much last night. I'm not usually like this." Edward's face turned red, like a young bride who had been violated. He pretended to be calm, but couldn't help stuttering. It's okay." I was racking my brains on how to apologize to him when I looked up and saw that he was wearing the emblem of our university. Turns out he was my junior. Upon further questioning, I learned that he was already in his senior year, and his thesis advisor happened to be my classmate from university. My classmate always struggled to put together a coherent sentence, while Edward had some issues with his thesis, so he would just send it directly to me. Through this back and forth, we became familiar with each other. Falling for someone like Edward was an easy thing to do. He was handsome, the kind of handsome that had no trace of femininity, just pure youthful good looks. His features were strikingly handsome, exuding a vibrant energy without a hint of darkness. When he smiled, his eyes sparkled. He was the type to invite me to the boxing gym, letting me witness his clear and foolish punches as a college student. After being in the shadows for so long, it was natural to yearn for someone in the light. When Edward confessed to me, I was torn all night. In the end, I decided to tell him about my situation. I said, "I don't want to hold you back, so let's forget about it."
I'm sorry.
Edward didn't reply to me. For the next 3 days, he didn't reach out to me either. I thought he had given up, and I felt quite regretful. I really liked him. Little did I know, on the third night he called me directly and asked to meet up. I must have been crazy, getting up in the middle of the night and sitting in his beat-up car listening to him scold me. Edward had a serious expression, his hands crossed, and he said earnestly, "What you did was indeed wrong. You hurt my feelings." I nodded, saying, "I'm guilty. I deserve to die." He furrowed his brow. "It's not that serious. You did apologize to me. I've thought about it for a long time, and I think I can accept it, but you need to divorce that person as soon as possible." He was like a meticulous little dog, seriously considering a grave issue and offering what he believed to be the perfect solution. I chuckled in my heart. "Okay, I'll do as you say." As for the divorce, I hadn't really made up my mind. I had been dragging it on for these past few months, but now I've made up my mind.
I want a divorce.
Even if it's not for anyone else. It's for myself. During the company annual meeting, I attended as a shareholder. Alan stood among the crowd, shining like a star. Beside him, Jill held his arm with a poised smile, exuding the aura of a proper lady. The manager glanced at me, feeling somewhat awkward, and lowered his head without saying a word. I remained expressionless. In the past, Alan would always bring me along to such events. Because we had an agreement, we could have fun but not cross the line. This time, he brought Jill, probably as a retaliation for me mentioning divorce before. Unfortunately, I don't care. I hold 45% of the company's shares, the second largest shareholder after him. I don't need a man to showcase my status. However, Jill noticed me and walked up with a smile on her face. "Judy, why did President Allen let you come alone? He shouldn't have let you travel alone at this late hour. It's dangerous." This was something I said to her last time, and I didn't expect her to remember. Seems like she's really vengeful. I took a glass of champagne from a waiter. "I have a driver at home who drove me here in a Rolls-Royce. There's no danger." "You're worrying too much." Jill's face suddenly changed, turning red and blue, as if she had been rubbed on a palette of paint. I was about to leave when she suddenly grabbed my arm. The disguise on Jill's face was completely torn off, and she sneered. "You're just an old woman without Alan's affection. What are you pretending for? Alan said he's no longer interested in you, and he will divorce you sooner or later."
I was somewhat surprised.
Alan really does have a thing for this kind of woman. To put it nicely, she's naive and innocent, but to put it bluntly, she's all looks and no brains. I glanced down at her. Her looks aren't even that impressive. Jill was hired by Alan as his secretary right after graduating. They called her a secretary, but everyone in the company knows about their relationship, and they all give her some face. Over the years, she's become more brainless with the excessive flattery. I tightly gripped her wrist, smiling. "Firstly, whether we divorce or not is our family matter. It's none of your business to meddle. Secondly, it seems you've forgotten that I'm a member of the company's board of directors, and I can dismiss you anytime." "Dismiss me?" Jill sneered, flicking her hand and knocking over my glass, spilling the drink on herself. She took a few steps back, exclaiming in surprise. Alan glanced over and quickly walked over to her side, frowning. "What happened?" Jill leaned on him, her eyes instantly welling up with tears. "Judy, I don't know what I did wrong to make you unhappy. I apologize to you. Can you forgive me? Please, I beg you. I truly don't know where I went wrong." Jill's tears fell uncontrollably, and she looked pitiful in her dirty, white dress. This spectacle attracted the attention of everyone present. People whispered and pointed, their eyes filled with gossip. I underestimated her. I didn't expect Jill to cause such a scene. Actually, I was just trying to scare her earlier. But now she's turned the tables on me, and I'm truly getting annoyed. What is going on here? "Judy, Jill is young and immature. Don't bother with her," Alan said, taking off his jacket and draping it over her. I frowned coldly. "She is indeed immature. Jill, you spilled the drink on yourself. It has nothing to do with me. I actually wanted to ask you, what do you think this company is? Are you treating it like some kind of palace drama? Have you lost your mind?" Everyone present was experienced and could see through her little act. She actually thought she was in a romance drama. The smiles on people's faces were mixed with mockery. Clearly, they all thought she was foolish. Even Alan's expression turned unpleasant. But he still shielded her behind him and whispered softly, "Judy, let it go this time." Even though I had been disappointed for so many years, at this moment, I still felt a bit uncomfortable. Perhaps because the wound, even though healed, still ached and refused to settle down. He truly likes Jill, I suppose. The same Alan who used to say he despised foolish people now protects such an idiot. I suddenly spoke up. "Alan, if you dismiss her, then I won't mention divorce anymore." As soon as the words left my mouth, I couldn't help but curse myself for being incredibly foolish. It's been so long. Even though I no longer love him, I still can't accept it. I can't accept being compared like this. Alan cares so much about the company, about dividing the assets. So, when he considers all these things together with me, in his heart, can they measure up to her? The banquet hall fell into a silent stillness, with everyone waiting for Alan's response. It seemed like Alan and I were caught in a silent confrontation. We locked eyes, both waiting for the other to yield first. After a while, he slightly lifted his chin, his voice as calm as ever. "I'm sorry, Judy," he said. "She has to stay." Everyone's gaze fell upon me. I lowered my head, a bitter smile forming at the corner of my mouth, unnoticed by anyone. What am I still hoping for? I should have known the answer long ago.
Fine.
Jill flashed a triumphant smile at me. I glanced at her from the corner of my eye, said nothing, and turned to leave. Alan seemed like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he remained silent. I walked out of the banquet hall, the cool breeze of the summer night blowing away the cloud of gloom that filled my heart. I was about to take a walk along the road when a small car parked by the side suddenly lit up and honked at me twice. I flinched. Edward leaned out of the window, a smile on his face. "Why are you coming out so early?" "I thought it would be much later." I was shocked. "How did you end up here?" "I investigated the annual meeting of Alan's company and thought you might have no one to send you back if you drank too much." Edward whispered softly. "Your husband's mistress should be here too, right?" His teasing made me laugh. "Yes, just had a big fight. The power imbalance was too great, so I had to step back for now." But Edward wasn't joking with me. He carefully examined my expression and beckoned me with his hand. "Do you want to go watch the sunrise?" Maybe I'm getting old. I really can't figure out what young boys are thinking nowadays. Sitting in the bumpy car, as we drove up the mountain road, I still felt a bit dazed. How did I agree to come and watch the sunrise with him so late at night? Instead of sleeping on the expensive mattress Worth at home, I sat in a worn-out second-hand car and followed Edward up the mountain. At the mountaintop, it was pitch black. He held my hand cautiously, and we sat down on a large rock. I brushed aside my hair that was blocking my eyes and was momentarily stunned into silence by the sight before me. An expanse of darkness blended with a clear deep blue, adorned with countless stars overhead and the city lights shining below our feet. Behind me was the dark expanse of the universe, and for a moment, I couldn't distinguish where the light in the sky was coming from. The summer night breeze brushed lightly, carrying the scent of grass and trees. Edward embraced me from behind. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Whenever I'm feeling down, I come here." I remained silent for a while. "How did you know I wasn't feeling well?" He rested his chin on the nape of my neck. "Your eyes were crying." I didn't say anything. All in all, Edward and I had only been together for half a year. And Alan. I tried to think, but I couldn't keep track anymore. High school, college, graduation. Over years. I used to be able to count, but now I'm too lazy to bother. Could someone I've known for 6 months see that I was upset? Would Alan be able to see it? Of course, he knew. He just didn't care. Now I finally understand a question that has puzzled me for so long. I couldn't understand how, after being together with Alan for so many years, he could easily abandon me and turn to someone else. It turns out it has nothing to do with time. It's only about love or lack thereof. I turned my head and realized that Edward had been watching me all along. There were countless stars here, and the lights of thousands of households, yet his eyes only reflected me. Judy. He never called me sister, always using my nickname directly. He said, "Don't be sad. You're better than anyone else. Not loving you is his loss, not yours." Perhaps a gust of wind blew into my eyes, and suddenly everything seemed a bit blurry. I didn't say anything. I leaned in and kissed him. Edward was taken aback, but quickly took control. The kisses of a young boy were unreservedly passionate, a mere spark capable of igniting a wildfire. I felt my rationality evaporate and burn away along with his kiss. Even the wind froze, forced to be imprisoned here, rising in temperature. When Edward's sweat dropped onto my eyelids, I closed my eyes and held him tightly. Just this once, I told myself, call me despicable. Let me follow my heart's desire. Even if it's just for this moment, let another man completely fill the void left by Alan. I missed the sunrise. I fell asleep in the car, and when I woke up, I was still wrapped in Edward's clothes. He looked refreshed, bare-chested, showing off his strong muscles, and even took the opportunity to flex his pecs. Look, they can move. When we got home, Alan was already there. He looked like he hadn't slept all night, with his fingers interlaced and pressed against his forehead. "You're back." He looked up. "I've thought about what happened today. It's my fault." His gaze froze on my neck. I heard his voice gradually turning cold. "Judy," his voice lost its usual calmness for the first time. "Where were you last night?" I couldn't be bothered to respond to him. I was exhausted. Dealing with a college boy is too much, and now all I want to do is sleep. Alan suddenly stood up and grabbed me, his grip so strong that it made me cry out in pain. "What are you doing?" He stared fixedly at my neck, his eyes turning red. "Judy, what the hell is this? Where the hell did you go last night?" I used my phone to take a look at my neck. "Why does it look like a dog's? Do you not know what this is?" I sneered. It's not the first or second time Alan has come back with love marks. In the beginning, I even thought they weren't love marks. They were branding irons seared onto my heart, sizzling and causing unbearable pain. But later on, I slowly got used to it. "Why don't you recognize it when it's on someone else?" Alan froze, the anger in his eyes gradually fading away. In the end, I even saw a hint of sadness in his eyes. How strange. Can he feel sadness too? Alan held on to me like that, and after a while, his voice trembled. "Judy, I'll break up with Jill. If you break up with that guy, let's just pretend this never happened, okay?" I don't know if I misunderstood. There was even a trace of pleading in his eyes. I suddenly felt so uninterested. If he had said this earlier, maybe I would have considered it. But now, the college boy is waiting for me, and I don't have time to waste with him. I yawned and pushed his hand away. Get lost, a good dog doesn't block the way. The next morning, the aroma of food filled the house. I thought I had smelled it wrong because I don't like strangers coming to the house. So we didn't hire a nanny, just someone who comes at a fixed time to clean. I walked barefoot to the living room. Alan was wearing an apron, holding a spatula in his hand. When his gaze fell on my neck, he flinched as if burned and forced a smile. "Come and eat your favorite Coca-Cola chicken wings." There were 3 dishes and a soup steaming on the table. It was evident that it had been a long time since he cooked, and he was a bit rusty. The Coca-Cola chicken wings were slightly burnt, and the bok choy was overcooked and limp. Alan rubbed his hands on the apron, seemingly realizing that his cooking wasn't up to par. "It's been a while since I cooked. It doesn't look as good as before." I sat at the table, feeling a moment of realization. A long time ago, I used to eat these dishes often. Back then, Alan hadn't become successful yet, and we lived in a small rented room where the kitchen was shared with others. I was often sick and had poor health. After going to the hospital, they said it was anemia. At that time, Alan's career was just starting, and he was extremely busy, but he still came back every day to cook for me. I told him I could do it myself, but he always worried. He would always say, "It's fine, I'm not tired." Coca-Cola chicken wings, oil-blistered baby bok choy, stir-fried cabbage with shrimp, and sweet lotus seed soup with snow fungus. These were a few of my favorite dishes. Later on, Alan became a master in the kitchen, finishing all the dishes within an hour and a half, and they were all beautifully presented. I had forgotten how long it had been since I last ate them. Perhaps it was from the day I smelled perfume on him for the first time. And it never happened again. Now, after just a few years, I sat at the table with him, eating together, and I felt a sense of being transported to another world. I felt a mix of emotions and said, why bother? At this point, what's the point? Alan served me rice, sat in front of me, and said to himself, I've thought it through. I went too far before. As you know, men can't always control themselves in these matters. I shouldn't have disrespected you about Jill. It's only right that I ended it. When I go back, I'll have my assistant fire her. I'll control myself from now on.
We.
He paused for a moment, his voice wavering. We won't get a divorce, okay? I looked up at him. Alan was always confident and certain. Even when he cheated on me, he would look into my eyes and tell me with conviction. Yes, I slept with her. And now he was avoiding my gaze. I knew him too well. He was panicking. Suddenly, the food in my mouth tasted like wax, difficult to chew. Even if he had said this to me 6 months ago, I would have been ecstatic. I had been tormented by him for so many years, and my obsession was always for him to change his mind. Loving someone so much made me lose myself and my sanity.
But now.
Suddenly, I thought of Edward's words from yesterday, whispered in my ear. He was right. Not loving me is not my loss, it's Alan's loss. I won't let him torment me again. I shook my head. No, there's no need for that. To start over again would only lead us back to this point. No, I won't. Alan placed his bowl down and quickly walked towards me. This time, I won't go looking for other women. His fingers brushed against my neck, the slight calluses causing me some discomfort. Alan's eyes slowly darkened, his voice becoming hoarse. Judy, is he better than me? I felt a bit uneasy and moved my chair back slightly. Alan leaned in, getting close to my neck, his warm breath hitting my skin, sending shivers down my spine. Judy, he mumbled, his lips pressing against my skin. What he can give you, I can give too. Alan and I haven't been intimate for a long time. He finds me unexciting, and I find him repulsive. We don't even sleep in the same bed anymore. In that moment, I suddenly felt my stomach churn, a wave of nausea washing over me. I forcefully pushed him away and rushed to the bathroom. Everything I had eaten a moment ago came rushing out, vomit spewing out uncontrollably. I vomited until it felt like my insides were tearing apart, tears streaming down my cheeks, struggling to catch my breath. Alan followed me, his face filled with disgust. Judy, he said, almost incredulous, you find me repulsive.
Yes.
Compared to the pure kiss I had last night, this kiss was tainted with too much. For the first time, I felt repulsed by his touch. With tear-filled eyes, I raised my head and rinsed my mouth, exhaustedly waving my hand. But Alan refused to let me go. He grabbed my hand, pulling me up forcefully, raging. You still want to remain pure for him? As he spoke, he lunged forward, trying to forcefully kiss me, while yanking at my nightgown. His presence had become so unfamiliar, to the point where I couldn't bear it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I struggled free with all my strength and slapped him across the face. The crisp sound echoed in the confined space. Alan turned his head away, not saying a word for what felt like an eternity. Trembling lips, I spoke with a quivering voice. Alan, you disgust me. After a while, Alan finally turned to look at me. In his gaze, it seemed like there was no emotion, yet it also seemed like a mixture of countless emotions. Then, he forcefully removed his apron, slammed the door, and left. The next day, I arrived at the company. After all, it's such a big company, and the divorce involves shares and financial matters. I have to keep an eye on it myself. But as soon as I stepped out of the elevator, the manager came running towards me. Director Judy, President Alan just sent a letter. He fired Jill, and she's already packing her things. I raised an eyebrow. After all the arguing I had with Alan, he refused to fire Jill no matter what. And now he's suddenly so decisive. I touched my neck, where the hickey was already fading. Is it that one doesn't know how it feels to be cheated on until it happens to them? Has Alan finally learned to put himself in someone else's shoes? I was uninterested. At this point, what's the point anymore? As I was heading towards finance, I bumped into Jill, who was holding a large cardboard box. 2 male colleagues were with her, seemingly helping her carry things, but in reality, they were forcing her to leave. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara clearly not waterproof, smudged under her eyes. She kept her head down, tears still welling up. Everyone around pretended to be busy while secretly mocking her, pointing fingers and wearing mocking expressions. This powerless relationship holder had a big temper, and over the years, everyone dared not speak up against her. It was only because of Alan's face that they tolerated her. And now that Alan clearly didn't want to protect her anymore, what significance did she hold? Jill looked up and saw me. A deep hatred flickered in her eyes. I almost suspected she was about to rush forward and hit me. She wiped her face with her free hand, seemingly trying to make herself look less disheveled, and raised her chin to face me. Judy, are you satisfied now? I didn't want to become a laughingstock in front of everyone, so I didn't want to engage with her. But she persisted and blocked me in front of everyone. When she saw the new Dior coat I was wearing, her expression momentarily twisted. You old woman, when Alan comes back, he won't spare you. He doesn't love you, do you know? He told me himself that touching you is like touching himself. He has no interest in you at all. Alan won't leave me. He will definitely divorce you. I gritted my teeth to hold back, rolling my eyes. You, a young girl, willingly sleep with someone else's husband for free, and you're proud of it, aren't you? My eyebrows furrowed. Is that how your mother raised you? Security, take her away. I don't want to hear her nagging anymore. Jill's most foolish mistake is that she can't see that she's just a clinging vine that thrives on Alan. When Alan is willing to protect her, she can be arrogant and domineering. But once Alan doesn't want her anymore, she's left with a dead end. But she's still shouting now. It's really ridiculous. The security quickly came and dragged Jill away. She was being carried out like a dead dog, but she didn't forget to provoke. Judy, don't be too pleased too soon. Alan will definitely bring me back. Just you wait. I walked quickly to her side and chuckled lightly. You're thinking too much. This time, it wasn't me who got rid of you. It was Alan who wanted to get rid of you. As soon as I mentioned divorce, he was scared to death. He couldn't wait to get rid of you even before I mentioned you. Impossible. Jill's face turned pale, then she gritted her teeth and said, You're lying. Alan wouldn't treat me like this. Believe it or not. I shrugged and turned away. Jill cried out from behind, It's impossible, Judy. Go to hell. You lied to me, didn't you? Alan wouldn't treat me like this. He said he loved me, he said. I coldly laughed with my back turned to her.
Love.
He had said it countless times to me. And yet, here we are, reached this point. Now I finally see it clearly. Whether it's me, Jill, or any of Alan's other women. He never loved anyone. He only loved the never-ending thrill of something new. When I finished work, Alan's car was already parked on the side of the road. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to get in. I fired her, he said in a somber tone as we sat in the stifling silence. I sighed. You're willing to do that? I thought you really liked her. Alan smirked. Liking her is an overstatement. She was just a little plaything I kept around. Then why did you protect her when I confronted you before? As soon as those words left my mouth, I understood. Alan protected her not because he liked her so much, but because he didn't see me as a threat. So what if I caused a scene? At most, I would cry like a deserted woman for a few days at home. I wouldn't leave him. But now he realized that I truly wanted a divorce, and he was scared. Alan lit a cigarette, and the smoke filled the cramped car cabin. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes hidden behind the white haze. Judy, we've been through thick and thin together. There's no need for all this commotion. I can have as many women as I want outside, but they can't replace you. We're different to each other, aren't we? Alan, you're shameless, I calmly replied. And what about it? He exhaled a puff of smoke, a mocking smile playing at the corner of his eye, as if ridiculing my naivety. That's just how men are, Judy. At first, I wanted to be with you, but then I realized I couldn't resist. Those women would throw themselves at me. I could reject them once, twice, but what about 10 times, 100 times? He glanced sideways, his golden-rimmed glasses reflecting a faint glimmer. Do you think if you were with that guy, he wouldn't do the same? Judy, I'm a man, and I understand men. In the end, we're all the same. I leaned back in my seat and spoke softly. No, Alan.
Don't compare yourself to him. You're not worthy.
There was a momentary pause as Alan froze. Then he clenched his fingers, snapping the cigarette in half. What did you say? I looked at him, expressionless. Human beings are different from animals. The reason we are human is because we can control our behavior. If we're just like a male dog in heat, going from one to another, then what's the difference between us and animals? I want someone who is human, someone who can be faithful in a marriage, not an animal. This time, Alan remained silent for a long time. It wasn't until the burning tip of his cigarette scorched his hand that he seemed to snap out of it. What if, from now on, I no longer look for other women? He said, his head lowered. Judy, we've been together for so many years. I admit, I really can't be without you. I will try to change. Will you give us another chance? It was quite rare to hear those words coming from Alan's mouth. Before, he would tirelessly brainwash me. All men are like this. Men have social obligations. It's just a show. They won't affect you. Why do you care so much? He was confident that I would never leave, so he never had to consider my feelings. His words echoed in the midnight hours, tormenting me as I tossed and turned, self-inflicting wounds that bled profusely. And now he was telling me that he wanted to change in the future. In this moment, I believed that Alan was sincere. He was a man who disdained lying. Sometimes I even wished he would deceive me, so I wouldn't have to face the harsh reality. A WeChat message came in. I opened it, and it was from Edward. I have a graduation gathering tomorrow, and everyone else can bring their partners. Can I bring you? I couldn't help but curl my lips into a smile. Edward always tried his best to make our relationship public, especially after that day. He couldn't help but stick to me, as if he wanted to spend hours a day with me. With his good looks and outstanding qualities, I couldn't imagine how many young women surrounded him. I'm starting to like him more and more. I pushed open the car door and smiled at Alan. No, I have already found someone I want to be with. In the Rolls-Royce, there was a glass barrier between Alan and me. He sat amidst the lingering smoke, his expression obscure and unclear.
It seemed like he said something.
Unfortunately, it was too far away, and I couldn't hear it clearly. I moved out of my house. Alan used to not come home often, and I gradually got used to being alone. However, recently he seemed like a different person, coming home every day on time, like clockwork. He would come home and roll up his sleeves to cook, and at night, he would insist on sleeping with me, holding a pillow, which scared me enough to lock the bedroom door. Every morning when I woke up, I would see a full ashtray filled with cigarette butts. Alan is a very disciplined person when it comes to smoking. It's rare to see him indulge like this. He started reminiscing about the past, mentioning the times when we were poor, eating a plate of cold skin together. He mentioned the times when I would finish work late and couldn't catch the bus or afford a taxi, so he would ride a shared bicycle every day to pick me up. I would hold on to him and tell him about my day on the way home. Although we were poor back then, we were really happy, Alan said, with a hint of nostalgia in his expression. But I just found it boring. I've already reminisced about these things too many times in the past few years. I've repeated them with him too many times. Now it just feels dull. He seemed genuinely interested in reconciling with me. He handed over all the company matters to his assistant and stayed home with me every day. I was annoyed, so I decided to pack up and move out. On the day I left, Alan didn't stop me. He just had a somewhat sorrowful expression. When I was about to enter the elevator, he finally spoke. Judy, I won't stop you from being with him. You can have fun with him, it doesn't matter to me. But let's not get a divorce, okay? I'll endure all the pain you've endured. Wouldn't you find that fair? He said this with difficulty, and it seemed somewhat humiliating. For Alan, this was indeed an unexpected compromise. "No, that won't work," I replied, turning back. "He's eager to marry me." Alan finally agreed to get a divorce. The condition was that he wanted to meet Edward. The three of us got into a car, with Edward sitting in the passenger seat and Alan sitting in the back, looking a bit upset, but he didn't say anything. Just as I started the car and was about to leave, a red SUV suddenly came rushing out from the side. I immediately recognized it as Jill's car. It was Alan who bought her that car, and we had a big fight over it at the time. It was a narrow road, and there was no way to avoid it. Through the windshield, I could vaguely see Jill's face, devoid of any expression, as she laughed. "Go to hell." In that instant, Alan, sitting in the back, suddenly lunged towards me, as if trying to protect me. Edward was restrained by his seatbelt and couldn't move. And my instinctive reaction was to throw myself onto Edward.
Boom.
Jill stepped on the accelerator, and the two cars collided violently. In the last moment, I only felt someone's hand protecting my head. And then I lost consciousness. When I woke up, all I could see was a white ceiling. I belatedly caught a whiff of the lingering scent of disinfectant. "Awake now?" The nurse glanced at me and skillfully changed my for. "Do you remember the car accident you were in? But it's nothing serious. Your husband and your brother took good care of you. You just have a few scratches. We'll see if you feel nauseous or have any signs of a concussion later." I was startled. "What about Edward?" "The young boy in sportswear." "Oh, your brother got injured quite badly. The nurse took my temperature. He used his upper body to protect your head. He fractured 2 fingers and got hit on the head, but it's not a big problem."
He doesn't play the piano, does he?
I shook my head lightly, biting my lip. "And the other one?" I still remembered that Alan threw himself at me trying to protect me before the accident. My emotions were complicated. I didn't understand why Alan did that. He was the one who didn't care about me. He was the one who hurt me. But in the end, it was him who risked his life to protect me. Why did he do that? The nurse fell silent for a second and comforted me. "He got injured quite severely. If he had stayed in the back like he was supposed to, nothing much would have happened. But he insisted on coming over to protect you. He fractured 2 ribs, and one of them was just centimeters away from piercing his heart. He's still in the ICU. Don't worry too much, he's been stabilized." I lowered my gaze.
I didn't understand why Alan did that.
It's like I've never really seen this person clearly. Alan woke up 3 days later. Fortunately, he has always had good physical health, so after a few more days of recovery, he was transferred to a regular ward. Edward didn't come in with me. He stood at the door and said to me, "I won't come in. You two probably have a lot to talk about." I nodded and pushed open the door. In just a few short days, Alan seemed like a different person. He had been relying on glucose and nutrients these past few days, and he had lost a lot of weight. Wrapped in a patient gown, his unkempt beard made him look somewhat frail. I sat there silently, neither of us speaking. After a few minutes, I broke the silence. "Why did you save me?" Jill was coming towards me at the time, and the police said she had been planning to kill me. If Alan hadn't protected me, I would have been seriously injured. And he was sitting in the back seat, where there shouldn't have been any danger. Alan smiled and said, "There's no need for so many whys." My brain wasn't even functioning at that moment. The atmosphere fell into silence again. After a while, he looked out the window. "Maybe you mean more to me than I thought you did in my heart. Judy, all these years, I felt like I didn't love you anymore. There are so many fresh girls out there, and I can't handle them all. They all admire me. They all try to please me. Unlike you, you never admired me because you've seen me at my lowest point. When I see you, I'm reminded of the times when I was poor. Who would like to think about their own miserable days? So, as a result, I didn't want to see you anymore. I thought I didn't love you anymore." He frowned, seeming a bit confused. "But it's strange. When that car came crashing, all I could think about was not letting anything happen to you. I don't understand it myself. I didn't understand it either. Perhaps the human heart is just that complicated, making it difficult for even oneself to comprehend." I twisted my fingers, unsure of what to say. Alan let out a forced smile, but it looked so uncomfortable. I thought you would love me forever. When I was with someone else, you were so miserable.
I thought you would always be there for me.
During the accident, you protected Edward, didn't you? Judy, you're just so foolish. When you like someone, you can't help but give your all, and it's such a disadvantage, don't you know? I lowered my head. I once thought that Alan didn't love me anymore, but he chose to risk his life to protect me during the accident. And I once thought I would love Alan forever, but at that moment, I chose someone else. It's quite ridiculous. Judy. Alan called my name. I looked up. Yes. He forced out a smile that looked even more painful than crying. Let's get a divorce. I'll let you go, so get lost. But I hesitated. Your injuries haven't healed yet. Let's wait a bit longer. Alan smiled. What are you thinking, Judy? Do you think I can't live without you? I'm Alan, after all. Young and wealthy, handsome and charming. The proper diamond bachelor. There are countless girls waiting in line outside to be with me. I won't tie myself to a fickle woman like you. Let's get divorced quickly so I can go find a young and beautiful girl. This person, even at a time like this, still refuses to admit defeat. I sighed bitterly and stood up.
All right.
Just as I was about to leave the hospital room, Alan called out to me. Judy. I turned back, and his eyes seemed slightly red, or maybe it was just my imagination. It appeared as though Alan had been crying. What's wrong? He stared at me for a while, then sneered. Nothing, just stay away from your lover and don't let me see you again. You're an eyesore. His voice trembled, unable to maintain composure. The evening sun seeped through the yellowed window, casting its light on him, with half of Alan's face hidden in the shadows. He looked like a lost traveler abandoned by someone, hoping that person would turn back, yet refusing to speak it aloud. Suddenly, I remembered how he looked when we first met. It was the same evening sun. He turned around, and there was a smile in the corners of his eyes and lips. Classmate, lend me a pen. More than a decade had passed in the blink of an eye. As we walked through the years, we had both been weathered and changed by the sands of time. I had nothing more to say. I could only leave with one final word. All right. Jill miraculously survived, but she suffered a spinal fracture. It seems like she'll be confined to a bed for the rest of her life. I went to visit her, and she seemed to hate me even more, hurling insults at me like a maniac. The words were so harsh that I didn't want to say anything more. I glanced at her and walked away. Before leaving, I couldn't resist showing off my Hermes bag to her. It was something she wanted Alan to buy for her, but Alan always forgot. She was seething with anger, her eyes almost popping out, but she couldn't move a muscle, only able to watch me leave with confidence. I don't know if she'll recover. Even if she does, the legal consequences await her. I married Edward, 1 year after divorcing Alan. Alan didn't come, but he sent a big red envelope. He couldn't help but call me with a sarcastic tone. This diamond ring is too mediocre. The small diamonds on the ring I bought for you weren't this mediocre. That's when I realized he must have secretly come to see me, but didn't meet with me. We haven't spoken for a long time, and I don't know what to say. After a while, he whispered, Judy, if he mistreats you, come back to me. I smirked. You're just dreaming. He retorted, I was joking. You actually believed me. Let me tell you, divorcing me will be the biggest regret of your life. You won't find a man as good as me. I laughed and shook my head. Before hanging up, Alan whispered softly, Judy, I'm sorry for the past. May you find happiness. I closed my eyes. Alan, I hope you find happiness too. This time, I truly mean it. Edward called out loudly from nearby. Wife, come and count the wedding gifts. We'll deposit them into your account later. Alan heard it and silently hung up the phone. I rubbed my face tiredly. I'm coming. Some people don't stop loving each other. It's just that our fate is shallow, but our emotions run deep. We are destined to be separated despite our connection. Being together would only bring each other pain. Instead of torturing each other until old age, it's better to let go and give each other a way out. Alan, I hope this time we can both find happiness.
Alan's perspective. The first time I saw that boy named Edward was the day he walked Judy to the doorstep of our house. Judy stood in front of him, smiling happily. I was momentarily taken aback. How long has it been since I've seen Judy smile at me like that? She used to love smiling, but I don't remember when it stopped. It must have been since the first time she caught me with another woman. I can't recall. She seemed genuinely happy. For some reason, I felt a bit uncomfortable in my heart. I knew that Judy sometimes found other men outside, and I knew she did it to provoke me, so I didn't care. But this time, it felt different. After we got home, I intentionally undressed in the living room, revealing the scratches Jill left on my back. In the past, these scratches would devastate Judy. She would cry and curse at me, smashing everything within reach, finally ending up alone, silently shedding tears. I used to resent her for this behavior. Once a man gains power, desire follows him like a shadow. Those women would fight to cling to me, but I never entertained them. After all, I'm not a saint. Why can everyone else tolerate it, but she can't? At first, I felt a pang of sympathy when I saw her cry, thinking that I owed her something after all these years of suffering by my side. But later, I became numb to it. The more she cried, the more annoyed I became. But today, she acted as if she didn't see anything, holding her phone, her smile never fading. I intentionally bumped into her, but she furrowed her brow and went back to her room, still holding her phone. Something doesn't seem right. But I comforted myself. It must be one of her tactics, playing hard to get. Judy loves me so much. She can't leave me. It wasn't until Judy mentioned divorce that I felt like something was slipping out of my control. Unlike before, this time Judy divided our assets very clearly. It was evident that she had been preparing for a long time. I asked her if she was serious about that boy. She blushed and smiled. Yeah. In that moment, I felt something inside me explode. In an instant, all thoughts of doing our own thing, of not interfering with each other, were thrown out of my mind. I grabbed her tightly, and she understood me too well. She must have seen the fear in my eyes. Through gritted teeth, I threatened her. Dream on if you think you can divorce me. How could Judy possibly divorce me? How could we possibly get divorced? How could she even think of leaving me? The thought of her falling in love with someone else suddenly made my heart ache, as if I had been stabbed unexpectedly. I opened my mouth wide, but realized that I couldn't breathe. Strangely enough, in that moment, all I could think was, so this is what heartache feels like. So this is how she felt before. No wonder she would cry. I wanted to reason with Judy. She wasn't a fool. She should know that being with me was the best. I admit I went too far before, but I would restrain myself from now on. I had prepared many words to say, but when I saw the kiss marks on her neck, I forgot everything. In that moment, I wanted to smash everything. I wanted to demand what she really wanted. I even thought about finding a knife and stabbing her, and then myself. How could she betray me? How could she betray me? Just a few months ago, she was crying into her pillow because I stayed out late. In just a few months, she fell in love with someone else? But all she did was scoff and ask me, what? Can't recognize it when it's happening to someone else? In that moment, I suddenly couldn't find any words. Yeah, I was the one who said we shouldn't interfere. I was the one who cheated first. What right do I have to blame her? Isn't this what I wanted? Those young and vibrant bodies coming and going in my embrace, I am infatuated with that fresh feeling. The girls admire me, saying how amazing I am. They have never seen me in a destitute state. Instead of saying I like them, it's more accurate to say I like the version of myself reflected in their eyes. Perfect, powerful. Unlike how Judy sees me, I know she has endured so much hardship by my side, and I shouldn't be like this. But every time I'm with her, there's a voice in my head reminding me of my past. She brings up old things after an argument, trying to change my mind. She doesn't know that those are the things I hate hearing the most. I have succeeded. I want to sever the ties with my past failures, including her. I couldn't sleep all night. Whenever I close my eyes, the kiss marks on Judy's neck appear before me. I can't help but think about it. Her addicted state. Her holding on to that person. Her being intimately close with someone else. Each image is like a knife, slicing away pieces of flesh from my heart. But I can't control myself. When dawn breaks, I wipe a tear from the corner of my eye. Damp and cold. Oh, I cried. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, the laughter growing louder and louder. Is this karma? The tears I made Judy shed will eventually flow from my eyes. Now I understand how important she is to me. She has already become a part of my flesh and blood, and every movement is a bloody ache. Only, she had never left before. I had never known. Judy seems determined to get a divorce. I pretended to agree and said I wanted to meet that person. I want her to see the gap between us. What can that poor student give her? I want to take a gamble. She will change her mind. After being together for so many years, entangled with each other, if we truly separate, countless flesh and blood will be severed from each of us. She will come to understand. I didn't expect Jill to drive over. She was just a pastime for me when I was bored. I didn't really like her that much. She just resembled Judy a little. I liked the way she looked at me with those eyes that resembled Judy, with an infatuated and admiring expression. I don't want to be entangled with her anymore. I didn't expect her to be so extreme. In that moment, my body lunged forward before I could react. I could only see Judy. Before darkness descended, 2 fleeting thoughts flashed through my mind. She's okay, that's good. She ultimately chose that man. During those 3 days of unconsciousness, I was dreaming. In the dream, it was my early life. And Judy, from when she wore her school uniform with a youthful look, to later when she squatted at the subway entrance to share a bowl of cold noodles with me, and then to when she looked happy on her wedding day. Finally, it was her sitting paralyzed amidst a mess, crying and saying she hated me. I must have caused her a lot of pain, I think. She used to be such a cheerful person. What have I done? Suddenly, I felt a lot of pain, struggling to open my eyes. When I saw Judy again, I agreed to a divorce. Saying those words was even more painful than I imagined. In an instant, I felt like I could barely hold on. But she probably wants to leave me, right? I've already made her suffer for so long. Should I continue to imprison her and not let go? I want to see her smile, even if it's not directed at me. So I forced a smile and said casually, "It's okay, just stay away from your lover. Don't let me see you again, it's annoying." She looked at me for a long time, and finally, she curved her lips. Okay. I wanted to tell her not to leave. "Judy, don't leave me. I can give you anything you want. Please don't go." I hoped that she would turn around and look at me one more time. But she never looked back. I finally understood. She truly doesn't love me anymore. If this is the happiness you want, that's okay. Just go completely, leaving all the entanglements with me. Because this is my retribution.